First of all, let me say happy Thanksgiving to all of you, Commodore Nation. Happy holidays. It's rivalry week, Tennessee week. It's always a great rivalry, great game to be involved with. Excited about it, truly excited about it. This game will be for us in our last game in 2019. But this team had a great practice today. We hit the field, a lot of energy. And the tempo was good. We got better, and we're just trying to move it ahead. We're looking for our best game on Saturday. Coming off the win, I think these guys have confidence, in terms of where we're at, where we got to go. And we just got to continue, to push, in ourselves, to get the most out of these opportunities to practice, okay, and be with one another and make sure, that we continue to flow and just get after one another. Ask these guys to be greedy, and that's exactly what we want to be. We want to, again, grab these reps, make sure, that we push each other and play good football, and that's what we're moving towards on Saturday. For us, this week brings about, a lot of feelings and emotions, and it's a rivalry game. And, when you talk about it just a little bit, you try to give the history of the game, to these guys a little bit. And you talk about, what it means to the state. And there's two teams, in this state, both play in the SEC. It divides lines, in terms of families. You've got Vanderbilt grads, you got Tennessee grads on both sides of those lines, and just really trying to give those guys, who haven't really experienced the rivalry yet or understand, much about the rivalry, some history. And we go out and practice, we're hearing Rocky Top, just to get these guys used to the song, the crowd noise, just trying to familiarize these guys with the atmosphere a little bit, with a little bit of crowd noise. And I think it's about, giving a little bit of a history lesson and then trying to project onto, this football team, what we have to do in this ball game, to play well and to give ourselves, a chance for success on Saturday.
We welcome you back here on the program, and it's always great to have you here as the sun beginning to set on this day before Thanksgiving. Had a chance to see the cover of Sports Illustrated today, and it's Joe Burrow under the heading From Average Joe to Number One Pro. The writer, our next guest, Ross Dellinger, who has covered a lot of LSU in his time, and he goes to Sports Illustrated, and Ross, you're still covering LSU. Great to have you on. What's going on?
Hey, Paul. Yeah, I can't get away from the Tigers, right? I've kind of been assigned to them as my playoff team. We kind of split up beats as the playoff and the teams start whittling down. And of course, naturally, I get LSU and I'm heading to Baton Rouge actually this weekend to spend a few days. So they're a pretty incredible and interesting story this year in college football.
Well, the sub headlines, it's the greatest story in college football. And listen, there are a lot of really good stories out there this year, but it's hard to explain Joe Burrow to the average fan in the hinterlands, which of course Sports Illustrated has to appeal to. They're not like their regular Finebaum show or Baton Rouge morning show listeners. How do you explain how somebody who, let's be honest, left Ohio State because he struggled to get in the lineup, goes to LSU and has a good year, but certainly not a great year, and then this?
Yeah, it's tough, and that was one of the purposes of that story is to call people experts in the not just college football, but the NFL and try to get them to explain it to you. How did this happen? And obviously talking to people around LSU, how did this happen? And I think it's a bunch of factors, but really I think the main one, Paul, is the guy has had this talent for a while, was beat out by very, very good players at Ohio State. I mean, look who he was behind, at Ohio State, J.T. Barrett and Dwayne Haskins. And, Burrow, his second year at Ohio State, broke his thumb during the competition to be the backup with Dwayne Haskins, and that kind of put him behind. And it put him behind the next year in the battle with Dwayne Haskins. And in Urban Meyer, I think I don't know if this made the story or not, but Urban Meyer told Jimmy Burrow, Joe's dad, your son and Dwayne Haskins are virtually equal. You know, he could win the job over the summer. But they didn't want to take that risk, and they kind of felt like still Dwayne was slightly ahead. So they decided to transfer. And, you know, so getting back to the point of how this happened, I think he's always had the talent. I think it's always been there. LSU now has an offense, Paul, that's able to show it off. You know, and as one LSU staff member put it really well is, you know, last year's offense with Joe Burrow last year, you know, we were asking him to play Uno when he's a chess master. And now he's playing a little chess, and we're seeing he's very good at it.
Let me ask you, because the story, you know, we all know about Joe Brady, but he wasn't there last year when Joe made the decision. What was the determining factor for Joe to go to LSU?
Well, it's a great question because, you know, there was 25 schools when he announced he was leaving Ohio State. There were more than 25 schools that showed interest in him, including actually Alabama and Georgia. At the time, they both had two quarterbacks, and so there's no way he was going there. But I think both schools were scared, afraid that they would lose, you know, one of those quarterbacks. Alabama afraid Jalen or Tua, the loser of the battle, would leave, and Georgia was obviously afraid early on that Fields was leaving. He ended up leaving. So they were both actually after Joe, and there was 20 more teams, and he whittled it down to he basically made the decision based on how good of his opportunity was to be the starter at that school. It was a combination of he wanted to play big games, and he whittled it down to Cincinnati, where one of his former coaches at Ohio State was the head coach, Luke Fickell, and LSU. And I think what it came down to is playing in big games. You know, he wanted to play in big games, and he saw the opportunity there that he could play in big games. And you got to give Coach O some credit, right? You know, the guy is a heck of a recruiter. Danny Burrow, Joe's brother, told me a story. He went on that visit to LSU where they wined and dined the family. You know, took him out for crawfish and had these long X's and O's meetings and all this stuff. And Danny said at the end, Coach O obviously knew Danny Burrow was a pretty big influencer in Joe's life and decision. So as they were walking out the door to leave, Orgeron took Danny Burrow aside and said, "Here's my cell number. Please keep in touch." And Danny was just blown away. You know, the head coach at LSU just gave me his cell number. And, you know, they talked that week. That was a long week, I think, leading up to the decision. Joe talked with Danny. Danny talked with, I think, Coach O. And I think they settled on he wanted to play big games and wanted the best opportunity, and we thought LSU was it.
So we know the backstory. We know what's happened. Explain how Joe went from a better-than-average quarterback, maybe ranked third, fourth, somewhere in there in the SEC, to the number one player in college football and the number one projected player in the NFL draft.
I think it all goes back to that, just the opportunities in that offense. You know, just throwing the ball more, for one, and having receivers that he spent a whole offseason with, you know. So I think the talent has been there for a while. I think now everybody's just kind of starting to see it. And you got to remember last year, too, you know, he was a little banged up. There's some things that still have not come out, I don't think, publicly about Joe last year, about his injuries. He was battling some stuff. We've written a little bit about his separated shoulder he was going through. There was some other things. He was beat up a little bit. This year he's healthy. He's in an offense that gives him all these opportunities, right, to throw the football. He spent an entire offseason with a group of, you know, a lot of them 5-star receivers, throwing to them. I think the receiving group at LSU, there's kind of a cool story that I read a few weeks ago. They caught 10,000 balls, each of them, during the offseason. Most of them thrown, a lot of them thrown by Joe Burrow. You know, they worked together every week during the offseason. They met at the indoor facility. So I just think all those combination of things lead us to this right now, where this guy goes from, you know, his dad said the highest he had heard was 4th, 5th round for his son. That was during the summer when agents and scouts would call. And, of course, now he's here in first round. And to make that leap, I think it's just all those things, the opportunity in the offense, the work with receivers over the offseason. And Joe has obviously improved, I'm sure, over the offseason, whether it be footwork and things like that. But he's just given the opportunity, I think, is what it is.
Talking to Ross Dellinger. Ross, so let's broaden this out a little bit just before you go and get your thoughts on where you think we are with the college football playoff ranking, which is coming out in about 2 hours.
Well, the big thing I'm watching for, obviously, two things, I think. Is obviously the number one spot, and the number 4 spot is what we're going to look toward. That's kind of the two big competitions to me. But as for tonight, the big thing, where's Alabama? Are they still in front of Utah? Because if they're still in front of Utah, that can be pretty telling, because does Alabama have some kind of chance to stay in front of Utah, to stay in front of Oklahoma with a big win at Auburn? So I think tonight, that's the big thing is where is Alabama? Are they still in front of Utah? I would think they would still be in front of Oklahoma, but where are they at when compared to Utah?
Great stuff from Ross Dellinger, the cover story this week in SI. Great to have you on, Ross. We'll look forward to having everyone read the article, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Paul.
Great stuff. Ross Dellinger, outstanding writer, joining us from Sports Illustrated. We are back with your phone calls after this. And let's talk to Shannon in Georgia.
What's up, Paul? How you doing today, bud?
Hey, great to have you on.
Hey, man, you're sounding better. I know that cough is still hanging on, but it's sounding better. Hey,
Thank you very much.
I wanted to reach out to you. No problem. I want to reach out to you and give you my point of view as a Georgia fan on why I think Jeremy Pruitt has done an outstanding job this year. And I was critical of him at the beginning of the year, but I think he's done a better job than Ed Orgeron. And here's the reason I say that, Paul. I don't think Pruitt had the ingredients to make the gumbo, so to speak, and hasn't had at Tennessee since he's been there. I think Tennessee's gone a couple of years without an NFL draft pick in the first 7 rounds. If I'm not mistaken, LSU's been loaded with talent. And while Coach O has done a great job, not taking anything away from him, Jeremy Pruitt and that staff up there, they really had to make something out of nothing. And they have really turned that thing around up there. And I think Tennessee down the road is going to be back in the SEC East picture. Just want to get your take on that.
I feel pretty good about it. And I know Pat Dooley was on earlier scoffing at Tennessee, as you may have heard. But I think you have to build a foundation, and Jeremy has now done that. Going to a bowl game is critical. I'm not a big fan of playing the bowl-eligible game that so many schools do. But in his case, it was critical. And now he must translate that to recruiting and start beating some big teams on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And speaking of Pat Dooley, there's something I wanted to get with you about a week or two ago. Let me ask you this question, Paul. If Nick Saban was going off the field and in a post-game interview with, say, CBS or ESPN, what are the chances that you would ever hear Nick Saban say, "Go Dogs" or "War Eagle"?
I've never heard Saban do that. That's a common response from certain coaches. Saban's just a different type of coach. He's a pro coach who coaches. He's always aware. He's always sending messages through his interviews, and primarily he cares about his team.
Well, and the reason I ask this is, when Mullen had defeated Missouri and Georgia was getting ready to kick off against Auburn, they were interviewing Mullen on CBS, and as far as his take on was Florida still alive in the playoffs, and his response to the interviewer was War Eagle. And I was just really surprised. Yeah,
but let me, in defense of Mullen, he had a vested interest in that game. He needed Georgia to lose the game to give him any shot. He was, Dan Mullen is a guy we all knew in high school that was always the cut up, and he was funny, and he didn't really care what we thought or the teacher thought, and he still doesn't.
Well, I don't think it's going to be too long before Tennessee is contending again in the East, and Florida has dropped off based on the approach of the two coaches. That's just my take on it, Paul. I appreciate you taking my call.
Thank you. Really good to hear from you. Josh is up next in Birmingham. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
We are doing great. Thank you.
So I just want to talk a little bit. First, I want to go into, if you're talking about the eye test and you're comparing Bama and Utah, yes, we haven't seen Mac Jones in a big-time game, but still, you look at both teams, I still say Alabama. Am I an Alabama fan? Yes. But a lot of the media is just acting like they act like Mac Jones was playing, intramural football in the quad a few days ago when, Nick Saban, one of the best recruiters in the nation, got this guy because he felt he could do the job. So, if you're talking about Mac Jones, and let's say Alabama does go and take care of business and take down an Auburn team that has one of the elite defenses in the country, I just don't see how you keep Alabama out.
Well, I agree with you on that. And, I don't know the answer on Mac Jones. Doesn't matter what I think or you think. Saturday is his day to shine, and if Alabama shines, I think it's a case. I think it's case closed. You've heard the numbers. You've heard the metrics. Utah does not have a case other than a bunch of sycophants in the media who hate Alabama. They don't have any support out there.
I think that's the bottom line. It really feels like people are just tired of seeing Alabama succeed. They're tired of seeing them in the
listen,
playoffs.
I'm not going to name all the names because they're all easy to find. But when you see somebody put Alabama 8th or 6th or 7th, they're just hating on Alabama. And I know the nation will rise up and go, oh, there's Paul Finebaum. He's a Nick Saban apologist. I'm not a Nick Saban apologist. I'm just speaking the truth. I'm speaking the truth based on what I see. And I think what you'll see tonight, if Alabama is not 5th, then I believe this committee has sold out. In fact, I really do think you could make an argument. I'm not sure it would be a winning argument, but I think the real debate is whether Alabama should be 4th as opposed to 6th.
Well, like you said earlier in your show, though, that's going to take care of itself. Obviously, if Georgia wins the SEC championship, there's no discussion. They deserve to be in it over Alabama. So really, that'll take care of itself in the end.
Thank you for the call. Really do appreciate it. Let's continue as we roll on. Jay is in Knoxville. Hello, Jay. Nice of you to call.
Hello, Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
It seems like you're having a good day today.
This
week is thank you. I'm thankful for this week, and I'm thankful for your show for 5 years, Paul. Disabled, and you for 5 years have kept me entertained, and I really appreciate it. Just like the guy in Kentucky, Ron, he appreciates you. I do, and there's probably other people out there like me that appreciate your show so much, and it helps us get through the day a lot better. And I just called to wish you a good Thanksgiving, and all your listeners too. Have a
Jay,
good day.
I don't know how to thank you. That means so much to all of us on the program, and when I say that, there are a lot of people behind the scenes that you never see that make this show what it is. And I don't want to cry on your shoulder here. Sometimes you don't realize the effect you're having. I run into people and they may say something nice, but you go through a lot. In the business that we're in, we're most of the time we're criticized, whether it's externally or internally, for every little thing that goes wrong. And when I hear someone like you who says something so eloquent and so heartwarming, it really makes all of us feel great. Thank you so much.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Have
Paul.
a great Thanksgiving. Really appreciate that a lot. Paul is in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hello, Paul.
Hello, sir. How I enjoy the show. I have a question for you. I'm a fifth-generation Razorback, and it's a tough year with coach turnover. And it just seems this year there's not as much hot seat talk at this point in the year. Usually it seems we have 3 or 4 coaches that are right on the edge. And I wondered if you kind of noticed the same thing, if this is kind of we had Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, a couple different coaches that were early in the season on the edge. Your thoughts?
Well, Paul, I think there are more than you think. We've already seen one coach fired. In Chad Morris. I think I think there's a critical game this week that could tip the balance, and I think there's another game that won't have any bearing, but there could still be a change. And I see at least 3 coaches who are vulnerable right now. And I'm not going to name them because I'm somewhat reluctant just to throw a bunch of stuff out there. But I think everyone knows or could take a pretty good guess on the 3 that I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you think there are that many coaches that are on the fence or waiting in the wings? Are there more or less than usual?
Well, listen, the national landscape is interesting. Florida State's already open. We know that. They'll have a coach pretty quickly. I know that is currently going on. So wherever that coach comes from will then open up another door. Southern Cal is the biggest mystery. It looks like Clay Helton may survive, which would be one of the biggest upsets of the year. So that's probably the biggest job that won't open if it goes according to plan. And then you have some other jobs out there. So I know Mark Stoops addressed the Florida State issue. I think it will be more interesting to see what happens after the Louisville game. In the SEC, I think the Egg Bowl is critically important. I think you could see a really unhappy fan base. I think Will Muschamp is safe for now, but I think you have to watch the tone and tenor of that game. And don't forget, let's just say Auburn loses. Does Gus Malzahn decide, you know what, I'm going to Arkansas, and suddenly the Auburn situation is open? So I do think there are 3 to 4 possibilities of coaching movement depending on what happens this weekend.
Thanks, Paul. Have a good holiday.
Thank you very much. Same to you. We're up against a break. I hope you'll stick around another hour and a half of the program. We have had a great time on this Tuesday. We will be here tomorrow.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of hard feelings. They thought they should have won that game, and they still feel that way. And so all that kind of goes into it. But so there's the emotional value to it, and but there's also something interesting Joe Burrow talked about on Saturday is the Texas A&M game was kind of where they found themselves with the offense that they kind of run now. Towards the end of the second half, they started to run more spread plays. This was a team that was max protect for most of the year. Bring in a tight end, an extra running back to block because their pass protection was not good. So that was the first time where they thought, okay, if we get more guys out of the backfield, produce more options to throw for Joe Burrow, we'll give up less sacks. And it worked out. Part of it, Burrow admitted, was because they'd run out of plays. So toward into the overtime, they kind of had to expand on some things, and then they went into the Central Florida game in the Fiesta Bowl and went more spread, and Joe Burrow had a heck of a game, and I think that catapulted him into this season. And that's when they started to really realize that that's the offensive direction they wanted to go. Ohio State is now in the heart of its conference schedule. I mean, they played against Penn State pretty tightly for most of that game, and they'll have Michigan coming up, and we'll really have a full understanding of just how complete a team Ohio State is. I think you can think of former teams like USC where they were just blowing out everybody in their conference just because they were proving to everybody that they were head and shoulders above everyone else, and I think that's what Ohio State was doing for most of the part. Up until the Penn State game, nobody was within 21 points of them. I think Clemson's kind of doing the same thing since their close call with North Carolina. But I think for sure, seeing how Ohio State does against Michigan and in their Big Ten championship game, you can start to have more an apples to apples comparison with LSU, and I do believe it is a close call. He hasn't really mentioned the Heisman as much. I think he understands how good they are as an offense. And that's kind of the terms he puts it if you ask him any questions about that kind of stuff. On Saturday, he did mention that some of the offensive records that they had may never be broken again. And I think that's, a sense of what they've been able to accomplish offensively. And, there have been questions about that the past couple of weeks. Ever since they beat Alabama, he's been the clear front runner. And, someone asked Ed Ogeron today about whether he thought he would win the Heisman. And Ed Ogeron said that in his heart he thinks that he's the best quarterback in the nation, best player in the nation. So whoever they play in that first round is going to be tough. So down the line, I think that it really doesn't matter as much as we try and make it so.
We welcome all of you back to the program. Glad you're here, and certainly a lot going on. Ricky is in Mississippi, and you are next up. Ricky, good evening.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
We're doing great.
I'm glad you're feeling better. I know you're still fighting a little bit, but I got a observation on the Egg Bowl and the Iron Bowl, and with the Egg Bowl, do you think that Moorhead is going to be the referee on his job if he loses his Egg Bowl?
Well, let's think about this for a second. Ricky, if he loses the game, what's the record? 5-7, is that right?
Yeah, because they're trying to get to a bowl, I think, if they beat Ole Miss, yeah.
So he has a losing record. He doesn't go to a bowl game in his second year. I don't know I don't know what John Cohen is thinking tonight. I know what he was thinking about 6 weeks ago when we interviewed him, and he went.
I remember that, man. You talked about that. How he was dancing.
Well, I mean, listen. He made me out to be like a bad guy that I was even bringing up the story. I just simply asked him if about the rumors that Moorhead may be going to Rutgers.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He told me how impressed he was with Moorhead, and I'm not there every day. I don't see what Mr. Cohen sees. Maybe he sees something that we don't see.
He saw practice. They did practice well.
Yeah, listen, they're according to Mr. Cohen, they're the best practice team in America.
Right. But now on the other hand, with Ole Miss, the coach at Ole Miss, though, I just think that he has that same kind of aura about himself that Ed Orgeron, because he's from the state, and he may endear himself to a lot of the recruits coming out, the top recruits coming out of the state, I believe, because he had that same, he went to school there, and he believes Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ricky, you're right. Listen, everyone is different. I mean, I wish I could be like other people. I mean, I love people, but I'm not a bubbling personality like somebody else who wraps their arms around you. I mean, everyone has got their own personality, and Matt Luke has an infectious personality.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You want to pull for the guy because his dad played at Ole Miss, and his brother played.
Yeah, and see, Ed Orgeron, coming from the state of Louisiana, had, the Cajun. I mean, he endeared himself to that state.
I mean, listen. I'm a Southerner, okay. I don't want to, but I'm the son of Yankees.
Yeah.
Joe Moorhead is a guy that grew up in Pittsburgh.
Right.
He went to school at Fordham, which is in New York. He coached in New York.
Right.
His favorite sports team is the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, you tell me, Ricky. I grew up in Memphis. You're in Mississippi. What part of Mississippi are you from?
Well, I'm from a little town right south of Jackson, around Hazelhurst.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Actually, that's the hometown of Robert Johnson.
Sure. Oh yeah.
The blues singer. Yeah, Robert Johnson.
Oh yeah. So listen, you and I grew up in the same time zone.
Yeah.
We didn't pull for the Pittsburgh Pirates as kids.
No, Atlanta Braves fan.
Yeah, of course. I was between the Braves and the St. Louis Cardinals because I was
exactly because you're kind of halfway.
Yeah, but so I mean, this guy parachutes into Starkville, Mississippi, and and by the way, he's a perfectly nice guy.
I generally like the guy. But it's like a fish out of water in a way, though.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I went fishing with my dad, and we go. All of a sudden, the fish is flopping around the boat, and that's Joe Moorhead. He just doesn't.
Yeah. Well, we don't know. They're probably going to keep him another year, which I could deal with that if because he may improve. He may turn around. But we'll never know. We won't know until next year. But about the Iron Bowl, though, what Nick Saban said about facing the best team, I think he's ever faced this year. I tell you, I think it's the best front seven he faced
Oh, there's no. There,
Those
listen,
guys are real in office.
you would have to you'd have to go into the NFL to find a better front seven.
I mean, so he, in a way, he was kind of halfway right on that, and because he knows what he's going to face with Auburn, man. That those guys played against one another in high school, man. I mean, it's going to feel like it's the best team when they get out there on that field.
Well, you know what I don't understand, Ricky, why people get so upset about what coaches say when you know they're not ever telling you the truth.
Verbally, man, come on. I mean, they got to say stuff, to motivate their team, to get the media, kind of started up.
Hey, I'll tell you a true story. When I was a Cub reporter, I was covering Alabama football first year, and Alabama was playing Arkansas State, and I went to interview Bear Bryant, and he said Arkansas State scares me to death, and I wrote that in my beginning of the article. I said Bear Bryant, says a headline, and my editor called me in and like threw something at me. He said, "What? Are you out of your mind? I mean, Arkansas State's like a 60-point underdog." I said, "Hey, I'm just quoting the guy directly. I mean, I don't make up the news. I report it." And I was a smart aleck reporter. You can rest assured. But I figured if Bear Bryant said it, then it's got to be the gospel.
Yeah, right. But and this Nick Saban, he's he's the second bear. So everything that comes out of his mouth, they're gonna breathe everything into it. And one more thing, Paul, I like to with Tua, my prayers go out to him, but also to C.J. Morgan. I know he didn't get a lot of press. His injury was season ending. It happened. Maybe a few plays after Tua got hurt, and for State. So his season is over with, and I know he deserves to get prayers from just like Tua, because they all have dreams. All of them guys have dreams, and even though I know he's a top guy in college football. But these guys out there they're giving their all trying to make it.
Great to have you on. What a fantastic phone call. All the best, Ricky. Legend is up next.
What's going on, Coach? What's going on?
Legend.
So Joe Burrow for Heisman, huh? Wow. I tell you who I want to vote for Heisman, Paul. I'm going to cast my vote for Heisman right now. You know who I'm voting for Heisman?
No.
The officials, Paul. No one has made more big plays this year or impacted the game more in college football than the officials, Paul. I'm voting for the ref for Heisman this year. He is definitely the Heisman this year, Paul. I agree with the A&M fans. They got ripped at it. Every game I watch this year, an official makes a huge play or directly affects the outcome of a game. And as a fan, Paul, I'm just sick of it. And I'm not the only one sick of it. And it's time that college football did something to address it. It's just to a pathetic point now, Paul. I mean, am I wrong? I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, Paul.
Well, Legend, contractually, I'm not allowed to comment on SEC officiating.
I mean, every time I turn your show on, you apologizing for something. So why don't you just
hey, Legend,
out there and apologize for it?
Hey, Legend, you know me. I mean, I'm not that Paul Finebaum I used to be. I've got shackles on my feet right now.
Well, every time I turn on the show, you apologizing for something.
Yeah, I mean, you never see me from the waist down, but I'm locked in here. I'm not. If I dare criticize someone like that, I can't get out of here.
Oh, man, this getting bad, Paul. You need to start walking around New York. You look good in New York. You look like the cowboy way, dude. I'm proud of you, man. Hey, I don't know what these media members are drinking, but it's definitely spiked with haterade. It's definitely spiked with haterade. The claim that Utah and Oklahoma belongs in ahead of Alabama, that's just a lack of football knowledge.
Hey, one of them comes from your buddy Tim Brando.
Hey, I got great respect for Brando, the best play-by-play man in the business. Me and him's buried the hatchet a couple times. But at the same time, when it comes to picking football polls, he is delusional, Paul. He does not need to have a pen and paper in his hand. Name me one Utah player going to be playing in the pros next year and get drafted. You can't. I can't even name you a Utah U football player off the top of my head. And I watch football religiously. I mean, it's just a stupid commentary to claim that Alabama ain't one of the 4 best teams in the country. Hell, they got 4 wide receivers that'll be first-round draft picks in the NFL. Many folks are projecting Alabama to have up to 10 players drafted in the first 2 rounds next year. Who in their right mind would look at Alabama and claim that Utah and Oklahoma is better than them? Hey, I give you credit though, Paul. You've been spitting it out there, brother. You've been promoting Alabama. You know why? Because you know football. And here's another thing that pisses me off about Brando and other media members in the media. And this is not a shot at you, but I'm so sick of hearing media members tell me they don't have a favorite team. I'm a neutral party in this. I don't have a favorite team. You telling me that you analyze football, you grew up and you didn't pull for a favorite team just because you signed a contract with some network or something now, you become a neutral party. I don't pull for LSU.
Legend. I got to go to a break here in a second, but you know me pretty well, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
We're human beings. Everybody's got prejudice. Everybody. I mean, I watch football every weekend, and I don't sit there and go, well, I just hope everybody has a good time. I'm rooting for the best story to me. I mean, I'm selfish.
Well, I tell you this.
I mean, you think I was rooting for Oregon the other night? Are you out of your mind?
Hell no, you weren't rooting for Oregon. I know you weren't
I was dressed as the Sun Devil mascot.
They might not have a favorite team, Paul, but I'll tell you one team. They have a team that they non-favorite to, and it's obvious with the Cadells and Brando.
Oh, yeah.
They hatred of Alabama is extreme and needs to stop.
Hey, I said that on Jock's Monday morning. I said everybody hates Alabama. There's Alabama bias all over the country, and I've been lambasted today by all the do-gooders in the national college football media. Legend, hate to run. We're up against a break. Back with much more. Before Wednesday, I want to get the week over with so we can get to Thanksgiving. Arthur is in San Francisco. Couldn't be any farther away from me if we tried. Good afternoon, Arthur.
Well, I could call from Dubai.
I'm glad you're here.
Paul, yeah. Paul, I was going to talk about the Iron Bowl, and we can get to that. But, legend, he scared me. He said that he watches football religiously, and he can't name a single player on Utah, and therefore he knows they're not in the top 4. And then he was trying to tell me about projected draft picks, and that's supposed to tell me who the better team is. I mean, that's a scary road to go down. I think when it comes to the Iron Bowl,
maybe he just doesn't stay up that late.
Yeah, I know the bedtimes, and that's our commissioner Larry Scott's fault that he's putting these games on so late. I want to talk about this Iron Bowl. I actually think actually Alabama and Utah have very similar resumes when you look at it. Both teams blowing people out. They look really good, the eye test, both of them. I hate saying this, but I think this Iron Bowl margin of victory, style points, is going to mean more than it ever did. I think if Alabama, with Mac Jones, is able to go out there and win impressively, it's going to show the committee how good this team is, and you won't say the two are comparable. If they win, as impressive as that would be in a small margin of victory, I think the committee is going to look at the two resumes and say they stack up pretty close to one another, and Utah has the conference championship, and Bama doesn't.
Listen, Arthur, I think part of your point is 100% correct. If Alabama puts a margin of victory on against Auburn that is significant, then I do think it's case closed. But I think, and maybe I'm too close to the Iron Bowl, having been to about 35 of them. I believe that winning at Auburn is very significant. Now, unless it's just a terrible game and you watch the game and go, neither team really impressed me very much, but I think that's unlikely. So Utah will have the 13th data point, the conference championship. By the way, that's assuming they win the conference championship. But I don't think they'll have anything else going for them.
Yeah, I agree with you that winning at Auburn, especially with a backup quarterback, no matter how you do it, it's impressive. I'm just saying the committee, I think they're going to see those two teams as comparable if that Iron Bowl is close, and Utah's going to get the slight edge when looking at the
But I would ask you, if Alabama's best win is over Auburn and Texas A&M and their and their loss is self-explanatory, what would you say Utah's best win would be? I mean, they lost at Southern Cal and they beaten Oregon, which, by the way, I don't think the Oregon win is that significant other than the fact that it was in a conference championship game.
Well, I think Oregon and Auburn beat Oregon, but those teams seem pretty similar to me. So the best wins would line up pretty closely. So that's where I see there. And I think what's hurting Bama is the SEC, 5 really good teams this year. I mean, top teams. The rest of it not very good. But Bama only played 2 of them.
And I will say Alabama will not have played 2 of the 4 best teams in the SEC, meaning Georgia and Florida, but they played everyone else. Hey, thanks for the call. We have another hour